Is entitlement the right word?
Yeah, I think it is.
At this age, I should be buying a property. And since I can't, it's because of the migrants.
I'm going to save every single week for 10 years and then I'm going to buy my first home. No way. I understand why you wouldn't have that long-term view.
Does the pressure of seeing all your mates with the for sale out the front of sold signs, does it put pressure on you to save and
Best
get into
pressure
property?
ever.
Welcome back to Property Now, where we are on a mission to make you the property pro in your group chat. Today, me and the guys talk about juggling life experiences such as travel with property ownership goals. Can you have it all? Can you have both? Or is it just not possible? We hope you enjoy this episode. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Property Now.
Good to be back.
As always.
Good to be back.
Good to be back.
Good to be back.
Oh,
We're getting
stop
more and
showing
more
off there.
musical.
Yeah, soon it's going to be
We'd
full.
make a great
Mate, I'll see
acapella.
myself out.
It's going to be like an opera,
James
full singing.
brings us a whole note down.
He does.
Thanks, James.
It really does.
Sorry
It's like
for bringing
5
the
notes
vibe
down.
Guys, today we are going to talk about the age-old discussion, I suppose, for young people of, do you put life experiences over home ownership? Do you put home ownership over life experiences? Can you have both? That's kind of the overarching topic and question we're going to ask ourselves today. And the reason why we're going to get into this is because there's been a couple of things in the media recently. Chris, you shared an article on your LinkedIn the other week about, and it had a really sort of like massive statistic that I was quite surprised by. It was all about how young Australians are putting travel ahead of, home ownership goals and aspirations. And the statistic I'm referring to is many Australians, so the majority, 71% of Aussies under the age of 30 and 65% of people aged 31 to 50 would rather travel in the next 12 months than buy a house. And the article went on to kind of talk about how younger Aussies feel really trapped in this unaffordable housing market that we find ourselves in. And I guess their solution or their answer to that is like, well, let's just escape this and go and live it up overseas, which, as someone who has traveled a lot, I can relate to. The other one as well, there was another article that I saw where it says 70% of young Australians, this was in the Sydney Morning Herald, 70% of young Australians believe they will never be able to buy a home. So I think the main kind of theme of today is that my interpretation of that is there seems to be a mindset shift. When I was growing up, my parents would always say, travel first and then buy a home, get those experiences under your belt, go and live and enjoy your life and then settle down and buy a home. Whereas I think when you look at the generation below me, it seems to kind of be a shift from that to I'm never going to be able to buy a home. So I'm just going to go prioritize life experiences instead. So I want us to dig into, why we maybe think that's happened. Is it that there are these big societal pressures and societal norms that are imposed on young people? It's actually having a negative effect and pushing them to prioritize these experiences, self-care, travel, over the more sort of traditional goals. So that was actually a lot to take in.
Yeah, where do we start with that, Zaz?
Surprise, I just went on a massive tangent.
When you say societal pressures,
yeah,
define society. So what do we mean by when we say society? Are we talking about mum and dad, family, influences? What are we talking about when we say society and the pressures? So like when you, in your everyday life, who do you feel pressure from to get to the next step or to do that next?
Society is friends, family, peers. So you always, it's an age-old term, like keeping up with the Joneses or what's happening over the fence, So and societal pressures, what are we talking about? It's, it's education, it's buying property, it's having kids, getting married.
Financial stability at a young age, yeah.
Yeah, so those are all societal pressures. Maybe even traveling, like being well-travelled could be a societal pressure as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But there seems to be like an order. And I'm not saying this is the way it has to be done, but there seems to be an order in which you do things, right? Find a girl, settle down. If you want, you'll get married.
Yeah. And I think the pressures start like at home, like you were saying.
Sony, if you're listening,
asked
he
me to-
really wants to record
You asked me to
a
sing.
contract.
It's going to happen more and more. You could just sing your answer next
Hasn't TikTok banned a whole bunch of songs? Anyway, sorry, going off there.
Universal Music, yeah.
time. But no, I think, yeah, in terms of like where the pressure comes from, I think that for most people, it probably does start at home. Because, you know, you might, as you're growing up, you look to your parents or the adult role models in your life, and the sort of life that they're creating or the decisions they make. So you compare yourself to that, or you maybe hold yourself to that standard. As you get a little bit older, it's your friends. As you get older still, it's, you know, your colleagues or the people around you. And then I think with social media as well, the pressures are not just limited to like your friends and family and people you know. It's the whole friggin' universe.
Socials
of
have
people.
amplified things times 100,
Yeah.
times 1,000.
Because I can see what
Yeah.
this random chick living in the US that I've never met is doing at my age. And I'm like, oh, you are a successful business owner and you own 5 properties and you have 2 kids and like, wow,
Yep.
you've done all the stuff and you travel all the time.
I think there's going to be some trigger warnings today from some of the stuff I've got to say, I think, with this. And I think social media is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
When we talk about societal pressures, I mean, we live in a world today where if I want to get a hamburger straight after this podcast, it'll be delivered here without me moving from this chair. We get it straight away. If I want to get that new pair of shoes, I can have it delivered to my house tomorrow. If I pay $10 more, it'll be here today, guaranteed. We live in a time where there's instant gratification and immediate gratification. So when people see that overseas, that person on their overseas trip traveling, they think they can just do that straight away and there's no financial consequences for that. But there definitely is. And taking the societal pressures, I think a lot of the society pressures today comes from social media and looking over the fence, the grass is greener on the other side approach.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Right? But it's so much more amplified now by the fact that we've got social media in place and everyone can see so many different people and what they're doing, and they almost feel bad that they're not able to keep up with that person.
Yeah.
When really they don't know what that person is going through. They just see the highlights. It's a highlight reel.
It's PR, man. Social media is a person's PR'd life. And you don't see, you see the woman
it's bullshit.
Yeah, she owns a business, has 5 properties and 2 kids, but you don't see that her parents maybe left her a couple of $1 million to get started.
Well, not
you
even
don't see
that.
that side
Not
of
even
things.
that.
Well, continue.
Well, you don't know what they've gone through to get to that point.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
you don't know how much they've saved, how much they've sacrificed, what they've done.
The other side of that is you see the guy who's like flying private jets, and that's what his Instagram page says.
Yeah.
But in actuality, he just went to the private jet airport and took a photo out the front of one.
Oh, I've seen that.
Or they hire the Lamborghini for the weekend and they're driving around as if they own it. So you see a lot of that on social media too. So this is what I mean. It's your PR'd lifestyle. And we're not only keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with next door or keeping up with our parents' expectations or keeping up with our friends. We're keeping up with these social media bullshit. You might be right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think that instant gratification part makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, it's more around that expectation that, you know what, it seems too hard to own a property because they may not be willing to put in the time, the effort, like the whole journey around saving and building it up from earlier on. Like what Chris is saying, that you don't know what that person's financial situation has been, how much they've saved, what they've done, the things that they put in place, their budget, or how
People don't share that information.
correct,
on
or how
social
they've
media.
achieved their goals. But you just see that, wow, they bought a place or they own 5 investment properties. And if I can't do that in a year, you know what? Forget about it. It's too hard.
Yeah.
It's not a
something
sexy
against
story
me.
showing people you save $400 a week. That's not very sexy. They want to get to the end and show the end goal.
Yeah.
And to the instant gratification point, again, you can have everything now with buy now, pay later society. You can have you can bloody buy now, pay later a pub meal these days, which is ridiculous. But it's this instant gratification. And then when it comes to the home ownership point, then they see their friends progress in life. And they see that they're at 23, 24, 25, even to the 30s, and they start buying a property. And then because they're used to this instant gratification side of things, they then think, I'm now 30, I'm entitled to get a property. But they haven't done the hard work to get to that point because they're still living in that instant gratification mindset where they think that almost this sense of entitlement, right? That they think that because I'm at this point and now I want to get a home, that I can just instantly get it.
Is entitlement the right word?
Yeah, I think it is.
Because
there is an entitlement.
I don't know if they feel entitled to, but they probably feel like, shit, what have I been doing? for the last 10 years.
There could be
like,
a
how
form
my
of
friend,
regret.
Yeah,
maybe.
it's regret. I don't think they feel entitled to the property. I think they feel like, man, like quarter life crisis almost. Like all my friends are buying property, or my friends are getting married, or my friends are having kids, or whatever. My friends own businesses. I don't know, whatever your version of that is. And you're thinking, well, hold on, that's my peer group. Like, why aren't I there? Like, I don't. Yeah,
I get that entitlement point a bit, because it is like, I think you hit that age and you think, oh, shit, why isn't this happening for me?
Correct.
And it sort of is entitlement in a way, because you're like, well, I'm 30, like I should own property by now. Why don't I? And yeah, I get you. I think when you think about the fact that with buying a house in particular, like we know it takes 10 years to save enough money for a house deposit. So if you're 20, and I'm not going to speak for, I'm not 20. I don't know why I'm going to say I'm not going to speak for 20-year-olds. I can't anyways. But, think about my little sister. I don't think she's thinking right now, oh, okay, I'm going to save every single week for 10 years and then I'm going to buy my first home. No way. Like, I understand why you wouldn't have that long-term view. I can't imagine what I'm going to be doing in 2 years, let alone 10.
Like, we've been financially wired now very differently, and we almost need to be rewired with how we think about finances, to be honest, because it's like you get to that age of 30 and she hasn't decided to save for that 10 years, and then she's like, okay, well, I now see the highlight reel of my friends. So you see that snapshot of them buying a property. You don't see the full journey. You see that snapshot of them buying their family home or buying an investment property, and you think, well, why can't I do that? But you haven't seen what's happened in the background, which is all the sacrifices that people have probably made to get to that point, and all the things that they didn't do to get to that point. And we're not talking about the people that have handouts and, the people
Why do you
that...
point at me?
You got handouts.
I had no handout.
I was fortunate. We had the
we had the
parents' guarantee, right?
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily a handout. It's not a cash handout. But we're talking about the people that are wanting to do it on their own, and the people that are wanting to save by themselves and get into property by themselves. There is a series of sacrifices and things you cannot do. It's not, can I holiday and save? There's certain things you cannot do.
So you're saying you can't do both?
There's a reality check that some people need to have, that you may not be able to do both right now.
You said something, right? It's about how we're wired, right? So and I'll tell you personal story. I bought property and I traveled in my early 20s. So I did both.
Which did you do first?
They were around about the same time. Like, to be honest with you, like, but I was able to do that because of sacrifices. So I had 2 jobs, 3 jobs at a time whilst I was studying, or when I was working full time and had a part-time job. But also, good Italian boy, I was living at home.
Yep.
Right. So when everyone was going out for after work drinks on Friday, I was training it back to Western Sydney and then going to my other job.
Shot in limoncello.
Quick limoncello. And then
then on to your next job.
But so I didn't have...
Much cheaper to drink at home.
It is cheaper. It still is. It
That's
even was back
Get
then.
the lemon.
Yeah.
It's a good savings hack.
Make it the limoncello.
Drink at home.
My parents have no accent. Anyway.
Michael,
It's
get the lemon.
it's a better story if they do.
But the point is, like, that's how I was able to do it, and I was able to travel. I wouldn't. But
Jason's lost it.
I would never regret the travel experience that I've had. I've been to Europe. I've been to the States. I've done both those things a few times. I'll never regret those. I had some of the best experiences. Right? Would I be a little bit better off if I didn't do those financially? Maybe a little bit. But like personally, like, would I be better off without having those experiences? I don't think so. So I'm glad I did both. But you see, there's a lot of people today, and I think a big mistake today is, you've nailed it, right, with the instant gratification and the way so people that are going, hey, well, I need to go on holidays now because it's June and everyone's in Europe.
Well, because everyone's doing it.
So I need to do it now. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use the credit card to finance this holiday. Massive mistake.
Hey, and we're not talking $5,000 either. They're talking like 20 to 30 grand, Kentucky, 6-week big trips. Like, these are trips that...
So not only are you going on the holiday...
Sounds like heaven.
Yeah. No, okay, but is it heaven?
I'm on a beach in Italy right now.
Zaz, is it
I never
heaven?
did it, and I don't regret it. But I'm not a travel...
But you don't know what you're missing out on. You don't know what you're missing out on. But if you say
never too late.
You're in heaven on the beach in Zagreb, or is that even a beach? Anyway, whatever, in Croatia.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, right? So you're on the beach, but when you come back and you're paying down the 20 grand debt off your credit card, that's not heaven anymore, right? Yeah. So this is the issue.
You're just so far behind.
But if you can save up for that holiday and then go for it a couple of years later, I don't mind that, because you're getting the good experience. You're also creating good saving habits so that when you come back, you can save up for your first property as well. So, but that's what we've got wrong today. And you've hit the nail on the head.
You asked me, you think you can't have both. You definitely can have
Yeah.
both, but you need to decide when you have both.
Yeah.
So if you're 22 and you got a bunch of savings and you decide to go on holiday, that's fine. That's your choice. But you then need to understand that that's going to have impacts when you get to 28, 30 and you want to buy a property or you want to do something else in a large financial manner, that you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. And we all know this person, a good friend of mine, when he was 23, he'd worked his ass off since 16, 17, having 2 jobs. So he left school. He was working at nights, had 2 jobs while he was studying full time from 18 to 23 years
Trying to
old.
figure out who it is.
He managed to save up about 90 grand. And this was 5 years ago at the age of 23. And he came to me, he was at a bit of a fork in the road.
I know who it is.
And he's like, what do I do here? And obviously I'm a love for property. So you got 2 decisions to make. You can spend it and buy things, or you can invest it in property. Fast forward 5 years. He's now invested in 2 properties. He's 28. He's now able to, if he wants to, sell both those properties, making a $450,000 profit, and that's after tax as well. And on top of the 100 grand or 90 grand that he invested, 540 grand. He's now got 540 grand in cash that he can utilize at the age of 28.
That's a lot of world tours.
But
A lot of Kentucky.
at the age of 23, if he's doing that, by the age of 28, he's not going to have that.
They miss the
He's
compound.
not going to have any of that.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a massive income at the time. When he's 23, it's 60 or 70 grand plus the stuff that he's working. Now he's got that similar sort of income, or about 100 or so income. But he's got flexibility. So if he wants to travel and buy a jet ski or do whatever, he can do all that. And he's relatively comfortable financially. If he does decide to start a family and get married, which I know he's considering at the moment, he can do that. He's got the financial freedom to do that.
Oh, now I know who it is.
And one of the pieces of
like
advice
a
I
I
gave him,
really want to know.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
One of
I
the
thought it
pieces
was
of
someone,
advice-
but it's someone else.
I gave him the piece of advice that was the best, and I look back now, the best non-financial advice that I gave him was, I said, open up your Instagram. And he opened it. I said, show me the stories of your 5 best mates. And he showed me the stories. One's in Europe, one's at a festival, one's on a jet ski on a weekend. I said, see all that stuff? You can't do that right now. That's the sacrifice you're deciding to make right now.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, it was a big decision for a 23-year-old to take in, to say, okay, he's still going out and doing things.
Yeah.
But he's just financially wired to not have that instant gratification. He now knows that in his 30s, he's set up to do whatever the hell he wants.
But are you saying do nothing, stay at home on Saturday
He didn't do
nights,
that.
cry to yourself
No,
to
he
sleep?
didn't do that.
You know,
He
you
cried a
got
little
there's got to
bit,
be
but
balance, right? But there's got to be balance.
There's a balance. I think
Yeah.
that those 25, 30 grand Kentuckys, buying that 60 grand car on finance, like he didn't do that stuff.
Yeah, the car and finance is a big
He
one.
bought a 10 grand
Yeah.
car in cash.
Do
He didn't
you-
have that against his name.
Do you need the BMW? No freaking way. You can sacrifice that.
Now he can buy whatever. Like now he can do whatever he wants.
If you're somebody that feels like home ownership is completely out of reach for you, we're happy to let you know that there is a new way to property. Hop on to coposit.com.au and find out more.
I look back a little bit regretfully at like all the Saturday nights. Like, and yeah, we had fun, but did I need 10 Long Island iced teas every Saturday?
Yes, you did.
No,
Live it
no,
up.
I
There's a
didn't.
lot. Aren't there like 5 shots in that thing?
Mate,
No, okay, you probably
don't
didn't
know-
need 10.
To be honest, don't remember. But
Yeah, I
but,
remember after the first.
but did I need that? Did I need that every week for a period of like a couple of years? You know, maybe that's another property there. But so there are,
It's a lot of Long Island
but I-
iced teas.
It's a lot of Long Island iced tea. It wasn't the only drink.
Probably was only 60 grand.
Red Bull
That's
vodkas.
true, yeah.
Red Bull vodkas.
How good were they?
But yeah, I
Jaeger
think
bombs?
I think you got to know like what do I want, and then go for it.
You got to try and at the age of sub 25, right? You got to try and have that foresight to shut. We always talk about shutting out the noise in this pod. We always talk about shutting out the noise, whether it's media or even sometimes your friends, like your close group of friends, of what they're doing. Shutting out the noise and saying, you know what, I'm going to buck the trend here, and I'm going to break this cycle of instant gratification and say, you know what, I am going to sacrifice for a couple of years, knowing that in 5 to 10 years' time, you're going to be significantly better off financially and be able to do all of that at a different age.
But we know that's possible, right, Grandpa? Right? You know that's possible as well,
100%.
right?
Yep.
But the data's showing that young Australians today are not thinking that way.
Mm-hmm.
So why aren't they thinking that way, Zaz? You're closer to them in age than we are.
Well, I think like we talk about the role of media a lot and what the headlines say and what makes good news in the way of, you know, being clickbaity. And I think a lot of these headlines point out how difficult it is and how many roadblocks there are, especially for young people that don't own property. So I guess like in the face of that, yeah, I can understand how your perspective would be like, well, if everything is telling me that this is not possible or this is going to take X times longer than, you know, it normally would, maybe this isn't a goal for me. And then you change your goals because you think I can't do it.
Because we know the median first home buyer age keeps growing. It keeps getting older with each generation.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's easy for us to sit back and say, yeah, prioritize this and do that and don't and whatever. But to my mind, this is the first generation that has actually ever said, I don't know if I can buy property. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Like, we didn't say that. The generation before us didn't say that. The generation before that certainly didn't say that. The kids today they actually believe that it's not possible, that it can't be done.
But is that not possible financially, or just their mindset is they don't want it? Is it financial, or they don't want to be tied down to a 30-year mortgage, or
It could be both.
It's probably a little bit of column A and column B, but I think like the language at least seems to be like they'll never be able to afford to buy a home. But yeah, I think it's probably a bit of both. Like I've spoken to, you know, people in their early 20s that have that view of like, you know, why would I tie myself down to that? I can rent, I can have flexibility. Because, you know, going on a bit of a tangent, but people change careers a lot more. People move a lot more than they used to. You know, my grandparents did the same job their entire lives. So, and we don't do that anymore. People move around industries. And so like, I think people do want a bit more flexibility. But in saying that, that's assuming that, you know, people are buying property just to live in it. And I think we were speaking about it yesterday, Jace, like there's these other options. You don't have to, because when I think of property for me, because of my values and what I want, I always have the mindset of like owner occupier, I'm buying my home.
Shelter.
And yeah, like this is the home that I'm going to live in. I'm going to raise my family in. Exactly. Like that's how I look at property. So I think there's definitely something in educating young people especially about other options. And yeah, it's something, I mean, I'd like to hear, Jason, putting you in the hot seat, but like in terms of, you know, what these other options are, or like what would you say to, you know, young people that are like, oh, I can't afford that home, if they're like me and looking at their first property purchase as like, this has got to be my dream home, or, you know, what are some of like the other options or some of the other things you've seen
Yeah, right.
in your experience?
I mean, that's a good point. And I kind of link it back to what Chris is saying and what Michael was asking about the question of, you know, what is it? Why is there such a mindset?
Yeah.
That example you talked about, Chris, with your mate, right? It seems like he's got some financial education and advice from you, right? Like you've shown him, hey, this is what you could do, or this is what you could do, right? And I think that's the main difference. You know, it's about understanding what your options are, making an informed decision, right? Not just going off generalizations and impressions. If I buy property, I can't travel, right? So that's what you're talking about, Michael, is that there's you can do both. And Chris, you agree with that around being balanced. So I think sometimes the danger is people assume too much and they draw conclusions. Like if I buy property, it means I'm tied down, I can't travel. Well, you know, from what I'm seeing, there's heaps of Jetstar deals for $600 returned to all these countries, right? Like seriously, like it doesn't always cost 30 grand. And you don't always have to go to a Kentucky tour. You can go see lots of different places. And it doesn't mean you have to backpack.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that because you're traveling, seeing the world, you can't buy a property. Like you said, while you're living at home, you could be doing 2 jobs. You can still travel the world. Well, if that's what you want to do, you can work out a plan and make an informed decision. You know, to be able to travel, this is how much I want to put aside every year. I'm going to put $5,000 aside and I'm going to do 1 trip a year. And the rest, I'm going to save towards a deposit to buy an investment property while I live at home. In the future, I'll probably move into it. But to make it easier for myself and for me to get into the property market sooner, I'm going to take advantage of my current situation. But I think the problem is no one's there to show that process or that pathway to that particular young individual, right? It comes down to financial education and literacy. And you're talking about the age of home buyers are going up. And that just proves you need greater financial awareness and literacy.
When you're younger.
When you're younger.
Because you can take advantage, right?
Correct.
You may have you may be on the least income you'll ever be on. Like your income will grow throughout your career. You know, you'll find a partner, and then you have Julie.
But you also have the least amount of
But
liabilities.
you have the least amount of liabilities.
And
That's right.
responsibilities.
Commitments,
That's right.
responsibilities.
That's
Totally.
right.
So you
if
can
you're-
do your 2-3 jobs.
If you're able to live at home, you don't have kids, you don't whatever, you don't have a partner.
Yeah.
Man, do your 2 jobs. Save up. Go on holidays. Save up for the property. Like that is the best time to do it, because let me tell you, now when you got a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, mate, you've got what you've built, and you've got the habits that you built during that time as well. There's no like going out on a limb or saving that little bit extra. It is what it is, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's what affects that mindset.
Yeah.
And bring back to your question around buying a property, it's going to be my forever home, my shelter,
Yeah.
or even the entitlement piece. You know, I think that's quite interesting. Is that, you know, at this age, I should be buying a property, and since I can't, it's because of the migrants.
Well, you
It's
play the blame
boomers.
game.
The
You
interest
start
rates.
blaming
Yeah,
every-
yeah,
You start
yeah.
blaming the world.
Boomers, government,
And
migrants.
But there's no
correct.
accountability.
Correct.
for
And the
yourself
media
your
helps you with
decisions at
that,
the age of
right?
30. Look, at the end of the day, at the age of 30, this might be an unpopular opinion, but at the age of 30, if you don't have the financial ability or even mindset to want to buy a property, you've done some mistakes in the past 10, 15 years, financial mistakes. I'm not talking about life experience. You've done some financial mistakes in the
You're
last 10
you're cutting to
12
my
years.
core, Chris.
Clip it, Peach.
It might be, right? But you've
I
done
felt that.
some financial mistakes.
And I think the
and
key-
You're not
but
there yet. You're not
may
there
look
yet.
at-
Almost 30.
But people might
Oh.
look at me and
Start
even
saving now.
that example that I gave you and said, "Oh, you haven't got to travel, you haven't got the life experience." Fine,
Yeah.
whatever. I'd rather have, and this is maybe a personal thing.
Mm.
I'd rather have the financial stability into my 30s,
Mm.
and I wasn't thinking like this at 20s, but I'd rather have the financial stability into my 30s and 40s, and particularly as I get to retirement age.
But you say that in hindsight, right? You didn't know that at 20, but it goes back to what you
But
were
I'm still in
saying,
my
Jay.
30s.
Yeah, it
so
goes
I'm
back
still
But it goes
able
back
to-
to Jason. It's who's giving you that advice? Where
I
are you
agree with that.
learning
Yeah,
that? You know what I
exactly.
mean? So
Yeah.
you're able to give this person who shall remain unnamed advice, but like not all 23-year-olds have a Chris Ferris in their life.
No, but they can, and I pushed him a little bit to it. Like he wasn't.
But when you say they can, like, what do you mean? Like,
Well, you've got to find those people.
Follow Chris on
if your
LinkedIn.
circle is, look, if your circle is just going weekends jet skiing or just going to Kentucky's, that's going to be all you know. You need to find a different circle and a different
Well,
group
and
of people.
that's the good thing about social media is that you can expand that circle. Like
Absolutely.
it might not be, and I think if you have a close friend, trusted mentor, that is obviously ideal because you're going to have that rapport and that like you trust them. But you can find that from, experts that are online, people with these like profiles that show you different ways to manage your finances. There is so much advice out there, and that's probably the one really good thing about social media is that like if you obviously take things with a grain of salt and fact check, but you can learn a lot and you can pick up a
Yeah,
lot of
totally.
great tips and strategies
Yeah,
from
there's a
just
lot of good out there.
finding someone online,
and there's more and more genuine, for example, influencers talking about that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
exposing that personal PR
Yeah.
on Instagram of private jets and fancy cars, talking about, or even making fun of some of these
being more real.
wealth coaches.
To be honest, it's us millennials that were doing that. I don't think Gen Z, and I definitely know Gen Alpha, the ones coming up. Like my kids don't want to be plastered on social. They don't want to, and they're still young. But I don't know if that like fake it till you make it. I don't know if that's happening
Oh,
as
it's
much.
definitely shifted
You
a
can
lot.
find this
Yeah.
advice anyway, though. Walk into your local bank, try and find your local business banker, and just talk to him.
How many real banks
Yeah, but
exist
just
now?
walk into any. Yeah, there's plenty though.
Bricks
Yeah.
and
Walk
mortar
into
banks.
your local bank, talk to a financial advisor.
I haven't been into a bank in probably
Call
like
a
10
mortgage
years.
broker and you don't need to do anything. It's no obligations. Just call someone and just find out your
More
position.
work for you, Jace.
Find out what are the implications. Try and become. I think we do need to. I think Jace, you mentioned this on like episode 1 or 2. Financial literacy.
Yeah.
We definitely need to improve how we are able to look at our finances, and I think we need to be rewired.
Why
on
don't they teach it in schools?
They
honestly?
should. That's
Like,
another. That's a
that-
whole nother
Like,
topic.
they don't,
is-
like we should be teaching how to do your taxes, how
Add
to
it
change
to
your
the
tire, how, like
syllabus,
the
yeah.
basic things of life.
I still don't know how to do my taxes. I probably shouldn't say that publicly.
That's all right.
They're coming for me.
Gonna count.
ATO.
But,
Make a fake name.
but it's like you said, we can shit can social media, but there is a wealth of knowledge there as
Yeah.
well if you're prepared to look at it. And that's another advantage that today's young Australians have that we didn't have, right? If we wanted to research, we had to speak to the bank manager, speak to a mortgage broker, go to the library and borrow a book. You know what I mean? Whereas now you've got information at your fingertips. Maybe there's a little too much out there and maybe there's a lot of shit out there. But if you can do your research properly and find the right advice, it's there. The Chris Ferrises are there.
And I think the social media is the biggest advantage and disadvantage at the same time. Because
Yeah.
I think, coming back to my original thoughts, social media is what creates social pressure or societal pressure. That's, to me, the main one. You know, you got your family and friends who are trying to guide you. Unless you've got
It still
very
existed
strict
though. You
family and
remember?
friends that are pushing you. But I think social media is what is not. It's not just for property though. It's for everything else. It's to have the latest car. It's to have the latest shoes. It's to have the latest watch. It's all that stuff.
It reinforces
and
these
when you have the
societal
latest of
norms
everything,
that we.
You're going to be sacrificing on some of the key things financially.
Yeah.
It still
That's
existed
societal.
pre-socials, man. Like you remember your aunties going, "Oh, when are you going to have a baby?" Like there's always pressure.
Yeah,
to
but it's
get
so
to the
it's a
next
different
step.
beast now.
But it's times a million.
It's a different
Yeah,
beast.
it's times a million.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the property side of things or the property pressure is still there even without social media. I think,
True.
you know, I agree with what you're talking about. Like on Instagram and stuff like that, yes, watches, cars, you know, jet skis, boats. Not too many people, I feel, kind of try to showcase their 5 investment property portfolios unless they've got an agenda to sell.
Yeah, they're selling a
That-
course.
They're buyer's
yeah,
agents.
that,
yeah.
that they're doing something or some course or they're
I'm
you
a
know,
millionaire.
like a coach.
I have a million properties,
Yeah.
but come buy my course.
Yeah, but
I
I
see
think,
a lot of the sold sign pictures from my friends, which
yeah,
is
right. Because I mean,
that's about
yeah,
it,
they are
property-wise.
celebrating it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a milestone.
it's a big milestone.
Yeah, but I do think from family, friends, or the external, internal pressures of society, right? The external stuff is, you know, when people are asking you, have you bought a place or are you thinking of buying something? But the internal ones is when you see sold signs and photos of people
Yeah.
buying property and you're thinking to yourself like, oh, okay.
Damn.
You know, like a lot of people are doing this. I'm not. Doesn't seem like I can.
Does that pressure, I'm going to ask you, Chris, because I know you got some thoughts on this. Does the pressure of seeing all your mates with the for sale out the front of sold signs, does it put pressure on you to save and get
Best
into
pressure
property?
ever. Sometimes we all know the saying: pressure makes diamonds. Sometimes, I mean, to live a life with no pressure it's not a
So it
life,
could have a
it's
good
not a life
effect.
worth living, in my opinion. You need to have pressure to drive you forward to that next goal. I mean, without pressure, how do you progress?
Yeah, some of my biggest decisions were made with pressure involved because you need to make the right choice. You need to go. You need to work for your whatever it is.
Yeah, but I think it's important to understand, you know, to learn a bit more about just because you see someone buying a property doesn't mean that, that's
Exactly.
the best thing for you.
But it might entice you to look into
Correct.
your
So I
situation.
think it's important to be more curious is that if you see your friends buying an investment property or whatever, is to ask the question, you know, what is making you purchase the investment property? What are the benefits? You know, what's the goal that you're trying to achieve? And then you think about that and does that fit into what you're trying to do? And you might find out, you know what, I hate the admin. I don't like doing or managing properties or dealing with tenants and this and all these
Yeah.
horror stories. So instead, I'm going to go buy shares.
Exactly.
So you can't assume that, because that person's buying property, I should feel pressured and go buy property.
And
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I agree with that completely. Like, I think, yeah, some amount of pressure or aspiration or positive influences in your life is really good to help move us forward.
Yeah.
But I suppose, yeah, my concern with that is that, like, if you're just blindly following what your mate did or what your mates are all doing and not thinking about your personal situation, your personal values, and finding out what's actually possible for you or what you want from life. Like, you might not want to own lots of property because, like you're saying, you might not want to deal with the admin. It might not fit into kind of your life plan. But that curiosity, having those conversations, and we keep saying it, but like getting educated, getting that
That's right.
financial literacy, property jargon, lingo, all of that up to scratch is so important.
That's right. And that's why in the ABS data, there's like, I don't know, 90% or, you know, or whatever the amount of property investors only own one property. And I think that's a direct result of, my friends are buying an investment property, so I'm going to go buy an investment property. But there's no end goal. There's no clear objective. So what am I trying to achieve? How many properties do I need? Or what type of properties do I buy? It's like, I've bought one investment property. I've ticked the box. I can join the conversation at the parties and gatherings. I've got investment property too.
Yeah, now I need to go on holidays.
That's exactly right. You know, so that's why
Yeah.
I think you got to go find out more about it because it's not always the right thing for you
Yeah.
Look,
at the right time.
And it's investing might not be the thing for you. I had a mate who good friend of mine who we grew up with, and we were all getting to the stage, our group of friends getting to the stage where we were starting to settle down, get married, buy properties, even get to the having kids point. And I had a very close friend who just wasn't there. He was just like, this isn't for me. He ended up moving to New York, got a job, advanced his career. You know, now he's married, now he's having kids, he's still living over there. But he had a moment where he saw the pressure from everyone else and went, actually, my career's important to me right now, and I want to travel. So, hey, I'm going to move overseas and advance my career. And for him, right decision, you know, even though it was so different to what everyone else was doing.
It can be quite isolating when, you know, you are looking online or looking at your friend groups and people are doing things and you are, you know, behind them. Yeah, you're not there. And if you do want to carve out a different path for your life or make different decisions, there can be a bit of judgment. Even if your friends and family don't realize they're passing judgment on you, there can be a bit of judgment that comes with that. It's not easy, but I think the important thing is, to think about what works for you, what you value, and then getting educated on that and what that looks like.
That's right, because you can only make a really informed decision for yourself once you understand.
Totally.
Right, and don't assume, don't generalize, right?
Yeah.
You know, take it with a grain of salt and what you read in the media, because not everyone's situation is the same.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're talking about the median unit price is 800 grand. The median house price is 1.6 million. And I think once that news comes out, it's like, oh my God. Right, it's unaffordable now.
How are we
never
ever
do
going to
it.
do
You know,
this?
but I'm seeing stuff in where I live. A 3-bedroom apartment just sold for $650,000 near the station. You know,
Well, the median's the middle, right? So it's lower than that, right?
right?
At least half the market is below that.
Exactly right. But if
But
you
it's the big scary numbers that
Yeah.
make you think.
and I think stuff like that stops you or discourages you from seeking out more
It
information.
paralyzes you.
Yeah,
That's-
because you've already made a decision. You've been influenced.
It's the media, right? Even the data that we're looking at today that prompted this discussion.
Yeah.
What would you like to do in the next 12 months? Buy a property or go on holidays?
It's too short term.
12 months. Of course I want to go on holidays.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's 12
Yeah,
months.
exactly.
We need to be thinking what do I want to do in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Yes, I want to like if you ask the same people, do you think you'll want to buy property
really
in
like
10
that.
years? Thank
Well,
you.
you know what?
Flip a page.
Let's ask that question.
Yeah.
Let's ask that
Yeah.
question to our viewers.
Yeah.
Let's see. Like,
Do you
let's
think
not talk
you'll buy
about
a
1 year
property?
goals. It's too short.
Do you
Yeah.
think you'll buy a property in the next 10 years? Yeah. That's the question. Because when it comes to holidays and property,
That is the question.
yeah, that's the question.
Boom.
When it comes
Paul.
to properties and holidays, right? I'm with the old El Paso girl in the ad. Pero que no los dos? Why not have both?
That was beautiful, man.
Flip
That
a
was
page.
beautiful. All right, well.
so many copyright
let's-
infringements in this
Yeah,
episode.
we might.
Maybe we're sponsored
It's
by
gonna get
El
muted.
Paso.
It's gonna
I'll have
get
to add
muted.
that to the disclaimer. Thanks, guys. That is a good question. Yeah, I think let's shift it to that long-term thinking because property is a long-term decision. It's not like, I can take a trip tomorrow. You can't. It's a long-term. It needs a long-term approach.
We should probably ask: do our viewers also feel the societal pressure?
Yeah,
Buy,
depending
whether
on
it's buy property or to not go on a holiday or to not spend money. Do they feel that societal
Yeah,
pressure?
are they having kids later?
Yes.
Yeah.
All the good questions, man.
Well, listeners, drop that in the comments. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok.
And also,
Anywhere.
If you like Zaz's outfit today, she's getting lots of compliments, and I know she'd like that to continue.
I just keep upping it with the crazy shirts each week. It's like the biggest decision of my Wednesday morning. What shirt am I
You
going to
were
wear
part of
today?
a band last week, the Triffids or something? Something
Yeah,
like that?
something like that. I did look them up. I couldn't see my shirt anywhere in this band,
It was the
but
collar.
it was a good shirt. It was a good shirt. I got some good shirts. All right, guys, let's wrap it there.
Cool. Thanks,
Great
guys.
one.
See you next
Thank
week.
you.
See you next week. The Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and they are general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.